our moderator today is Abby Ginsberg, the BFF president.
Abby! I also mentioned my friend.
And there's more round of applause. Not only is she our leader of the board, she is a prolific filmmaker in her own right, with many awards and great films under her belt. We're very happy to have her. And our panelists are, first is Julie Parker Bonello from Chicken and Egg.
No friends in the room.
Lisa Chanoff from Catapult. And John Lightfoot from California. So I'm actually going to turn, and we're gonna have Q&A. It's sort of casual. Abby's going to lead us, and I'm going to turn it over to her now, if she has her microphone.
No, I'm going to come take your.
Oh, you are? Okay, good. I'm going to go sit down. If anybody has any questions, I can certainly answer them.
So before I introduce our wonderful panelists, I want to know who's in the room in terms of who you've been funded by, as if, in case any of you have been funded by the people in the room. Has anybody here been funded by Chicken and Egg? Okay, we have Leah Mahan. Okay, has anybody been funded by Catapult?
We have projects that we
Yeah.
with, not me.
Okay, but, okay, okay, and what about Cal Humanities? Good, okay. That's sort of what I thought. So in fact, we have a group of people who have not been funded by some of our funders, and this is going to hopefully help more of us in the room get funded by them sometime in the future. Okay, so that I just wanted to check. Lisa Kleiner-Chanoff is the co-founder of Catapult, and I actually remember talking to her before Catapult came into being. Catapult provides development grants and mentorship to launch new projects. And one of the things we're going to hopefully learn from Lisa today is, when is the best time for somebody to apply to them? Catapult filled a huge need, which is its first money in. It's not like ITVS where they want to see the film before they give you any money. It's really, they're funding an idea. They're funding people who, present themselves as people who can execute the ideas. And I want to just mention a few of the films that they funded. It includes Art and Craft, Call Me Cuckoo, Camera Person, which I just saw the other night. Anybody here see Camera Person? Sort of an amazing film. Remote Area Medical, The Genius of Marion, a fabulous film about Alzheimer's, The Kill Team, The Overnighters, Trapped, and Wiener. So let's say that Catapult has their finger on somebody's pulse, because they have been funding films that have really made a difference and made a splash. Now, Lisa also was involved in Fruitvale Station. So I just want to say she is now becoming an executive producer of narrative dramas, and she was also an EP on the documentary Watchers of the Sky. I don't know if you saw that. She is a JD, another former lawyer, practiced law in San Francisco and with the Department of Justice, and she has a master's degree in museum studies and has worked with museums in the San Francisco Bay Area. She is on the board of Working Films and the San Francisco Film Society. So welcome, Lisa Chanoff, and tell us what we need to know.
Okay. Right. Let's see. So I'll lay out some of the basics, and then hopefully what I miss, you'll let me know. So Catapult Film Fund. We've been around we've started 6 years ago. Bonnie Cohen, filmmaker Bonnie Cohen, and I started Catapult 6 years ago. And yes, I chatted with Abby before starting Catapult to figure out everything I needed to know. And the idea was to come in early on in the documentary project and help it get off the ground. And the mission is to come in where and help create a sample, basically get you to where you have something to show, because most funders say, that sounds great, show me something. So we come in and get you sort of to something to show. So let's see, we are just some of the basics. The grants are up to $20,000. We accept projects, applications on a rolling basis. We just started doing that in last January, so you can really apply anytime. We are interested in really all kinds of film, all kinds of projects. So we don't have any issue or subject matter mandate or agendas. We are looking, like many funders say, but great stories, great characters, There doesn't have to be a social issue component. Let's see, let me address that question about when to apply. So we call them development grants, but actually the window is a little bit broad, what that can mean. We will come in as early as, you know the story you want to tell, you have an idea of how you want to tell it, you have access to your characters, and you haven't shot anything yet, and you need to get started. So that's sort of the earliest. So if you have an idea of the story, but you don't yet have your characters, you don't yet have access, then you can be too early sometimes, but that's as early. And then on the other side, sometimes, each project, of course, each story unfolds, each project has its own trajectory. You may have been shooting for a while, but you haven't had a chance to look at the footage or assemble something, and you really haven't really been able to fundraise yet. So you can actually have been working on it for a while, but you still need to create that sample. You still need to sort of get your fundraising off the ground. There are sometimes people, we created a 2-minute teaser 2 years ago. The story has totally changed. It's not really doing us any good, so we need to change it, we need to add to it. That's also a legitimate ask. But when we're looking at that, whether you're sort of at the right stage for us, we're always saying, okay, can we make an impact on the project? So can we really give it a boost? So for example, if you have a 10-minute sample and you kind of need to work on it somewhat, that might be legitimate, but we might say, is this where we can make the biggest impact on this project? Whereas if you don't have anything yet, or you've got that's a time where we feel we can really make an impact getting this project off the ground. So we don't need to see anything for the project you're applying for. We do ask for prior work, but sometimes people have no footage that they want to submit or don't have anything at all. Sometimes, but more often there might be some research footage or something raw, and we're very accustomed to looking at things that are not edited, not polished, to sort of get a sense of a character or of a place or what you might want to show. I guess the only thing I'll add now, and then we'll see what I'm missing, is that once we do give a grant, then we are really interested in helping the project along as to the extent that you are interested in tapping in to what. So we have a sort of informal mentorship. So we're really interested, and we'll look at footage and give notes and help with fundraising strategy and all sorts of things that might come up. It's not required that you talk to us, but we're there and we're interested in helping along till you're out and the project's out in the world.
Okay. So I want to ask you just a couple of questions that come out of the different types of films you funded.
Yeah.
The Genius of Marion, which focused on a filmmaker's story about his mother and her sort of descent into Alzheimer's and the impact on the family. What did you know about that story when you decided to fund it?
Yeah. So the Genius of Marion. I would say there's different kinds of stories following. Right. So the Genius of Marion, I'd say, sort of is an example, I think, of not a new story. I think there's been other explorations of family members with Alzheimer's. It's not necessarily a new story, but we could see it was being told in a particularly beautiful way. And this was Banker White, and it was about his mom who had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. So actually in this case, it's his mom. He had actually been shooting, and he had some footage. He wasn't necessarily even, the idea of making the film came a bit later. So there actually was some footage for us to see in that one. But it was we could see that there was just like a very it was clearly a very intimate and just sort of very beautiful approach, and it felt like a fresh approach to a story maybe we've heard.
I'm going to ask you about one other one. I'm just sort of because they're each different.
They're each different, and each have different stories. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, has anybody here seen Art and Craft? okay, a handful of people, give it the one sentence about what it is, and then explain why you funded that one.
Okay,
Or what, in what condition it came to you, because that was, that could have been a stretch.
Yeah, yeah. Art and Craft is about an art forger, about a guy who sort of an unusual individual who to deal with sort of some of his, I would say, mental health
Yes.
issues, took on personas, different personas, and donated forgeries to museums. And so it wasn't actually like a fraud because he didn't receive any money in exchange. It was just part of his coping mechanism, but he was actually an excellent forger. And so it's about his story and then following him. So that was a case, I'm trying to remember if there was any footage from that one. I mean, that was an example of, oh man, what a great story.
Yeah.
And there had been, let me see, there had been some, I think the filmmakers had learned about him, I think, from a New York Times article, and there had been some press about him. But it was just like, just a fantastic story. The filmmakers, Sam Coleman and Jennifer Grousman, we really liked their prior work. Different types of films, but the prior work was really strong, and they had this fantastic access to him. They, basically, I mean, they even went along with him on one of his capers, so they had this really great access and really feeling like, they're going to tell this story in a way, it's a tricky one because you don't want to be telling it in a way where it's a quirky story, but you don't want to be laughing at anybody or you have to really you have to walk a very delicate balance. Of course, we didn't know, we thought that would be the case, and I think it was. So I'm trying to remember if there was, I don't even know that there was any footage.
All right, so
yeah.
one more question, then we'll sort of move on to
Yeah.
our next presenter. If somebody has never made a film before, what do they need in order to be taken seriously because they either have a good idea, they have great access, whatever it is, but they don't have a prior work that they produced and directed?
Right.
What do they need in order to come to you?
Right. So that's a great question. It's a little bit harder because, especially if there's really nothing to see for this project and there's no prior work, that becomes a harder decision to make. If it's your first film, then it's always great to get someone who's experienced on your team, if you can. Get someone experienced on your team. Let's say if you have some footage in that case, that can help. So if you can really show us a little something, not even something edited necessarily, but something to show. And if there's something special about the application, like the access, like amazing access can really make something rise a little bit to the top, towards the top, or like, oh my God, I've never heard that story before, or this fantastic approach. So there's other ways to do that. There was one case of a project that we did fund, a first-time filmmaker, had a producer, but she actually didn't have any footage. This is Sarah Dosa's the mushroom
one.
the last season,
Yeah.
where she didn't have any footage yet. It was just such a fantastic story that she wanted to tell about mushroom foragers in Oregon. But she did send some photographs of the area, and that helped a little bit because we could see this cool place that we were going to be entering, unusual place that we were going to be entering in the film, and it showed a little bit about her eye. This is not so much the first-time filmmaker, but I've had people. I encourage people. Let's say it's about a fantastic character. You don't really have any footage. I sometimes will Google them because I want to. So you can send us information about the characters or visuals without even it being your stuff, but you can get a little creative in terms of materials that you can send to give us a sense of what the film is.
All right, so would it be helpful if we stay with Catapult for another few minutes and take some questions from the audience? Because we're in it now?
Sure.
Okay, I'm okay with
I'll
that,
take
if
the
you're okay
mic
with
to
it.
the person.
Okay, there was a hand over here. Do you have a hand
Okay, here, let's mic you. We are taping this, and we want to get the audio to come through, so please give us your question through the mic.
Oh, sure. Hi. I wanted to find out how you apply. Is it online?
Yeah, good question.
Simple question.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's catapultfilmfund.org. So we have you apply online, there's basically a little online form, and then you attach, I think it's a 7-page application to that form. And, actually, I encourage people to, take a look at the website, take a look at the form. If you have any questions about the process, to be in touch. And we try to be responsive. So it's always better to ask before if you have any questions about it. But yeah, and then we're trying to work on this, but it does take us 3 to 4 months to get through the application.
Our next question is over here.
You kind of just answered it.
Okay.
I was going to ask how long it takes to get back to the filmmaker after they apply, but 3 to 4 months.
It's that, like I say, we're trying to make it shorter, but.
Did you have a question here? Okay, please talk into the mic.
When you say a sample, do you mean a 10-minute sample, or as a rough cut a sample for a film?
A sample for your prior work or for the project you're
For the
applying
project itself, yeah.
For the project, it's really up to you. In a sense, if you already have a rough cut.
No, if it was going to be to make a rough cut, and the rough cut is a sample to attract funding to
Oh,
finish
the
it.
sample that you want to make, right?
Right.
Oh,
The
they're
project
applying for how you'd use the funds. Again, that's actually up to you. So, sometimes, and we do like to know, and, but it might be, I need a 10-minute sample to start sending around to funders. Or it might be, there are cases, there are some films that people can't really see until there's a kind of more of assembly or something more than a 10-minute. So, you might feel I need to go straight to that. That's going to be my sample. So we really, we hear from you what you think you need, and that's up to you.
Okay, and one other question. When you said do you Google the characters or the story or the filmmaker? When you said if you don't have enough
We don't Google the
information?
filmmaker. No, I mean,
Oh, okay.
like there might be.
Wow, you're really digging in.
No, we're not looking for, no, I mean, like, the one example, I can give an example of that, whereas there was a film about Anita Hill. And so, I remember those, Anita Hill, and I remember the hearings, but I kind of like, what's she, what's she doing now? And what is she, how is she now? So I actually looked her up to see how she,
Did you fund that?
yeah.
Our next question is here.
Just a very quick question. So their development grants, can you be too far along in a project to qualify?
Yeah.
Okay, what's too far along?
So
to
too far
qualify?
along is, part of it is, for example, if you already have a rough cut, then chances are that's too far along. But a lot of it depends on how you want to use the grant. So, if it's a very legitimate, in the scheme of things, we need production funding, but that wouldn't be right for us. Because, clearly, development includes some production, but if it's, we need to do another shoot, then we might say that's great, but we want to do this, get you to, the sample and the boost stuff, so.
Thank you.
Hi, you briefly talked about applicants who have come to you having no prior work. I'm curious if you've ever come across any applicants who have a history of work but have been in the narrative space and are transitioning into the documentary space. What kind of considerations do you give for those projects?
Right. Yeah, a lot of times, somebody might have done different types of work and, might be, television or narratives. And so we would say, you should include, generally speaking, send us what you think will support your application. So there was a project, actually, Komikuchu, where they had a narrative. And so they sent that along. And so I would say send it and then say, what should we glean from that? It shows that we can complete a project, or it shows how we like to, approach something or other. Like, what does it have to do with the project that you're applying for? Not just subject matter, but in terms of the style. And same thing with, let's say you've done sort of more news type of things. Well, that may or may not be the style that you want to do, but it might show how your interview style or something like that.
Our next question is here. Go ahead. Please speak into the mic.
Yeah, if you've applied previously and not been granted funding, would you recommend possibly applying again at a later stage? And if so, what would you be looking for in the application to change?
So we definitely welcome, people to apply more than once. The state, I don't think you met different, well, you might have did, but it becomes tricky because if you've actually progressed, which is great for your project, you might then have you might be too far along for us. But in terms of, subsequent applications, we want to see, it should be certainly, there should be something that's different about than the first one. Whether it's, you've secured your access that was maybe more iffy before, or you've figured out how you want to tell the story better, or, things might have solidified a little bit. Those are the kinds of things. Maybe you've added a character or a variety of things. It's actually fine to, if you weren't able to get a grant, to contact us, and we try to, and especially if you want to reapply, to sort of check it out, say, to have a conversation and get some feedback.
Hi. So you've started to fund some narrative projects?
That's me personally, not Catapult.
Oh, you personally? Okay.
That was it.
That was Fruitvale Station that
Yeah.
she was involved with.
Yeah.
Oh.
The Catapult's still documentaries.
Oh, okay, so it's just documentaries.
Catapult's just documentaries, 30 minutes or longer, and we don't fund series or, there's some things, everything's under consideration, but we don't fund VR and
Oh, but you do fund shorts, like 30 minutes?
30 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
If we don't have more questions, okay, we'll take you as the last question, we're going to move on.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ingrid, and I have a very specific question. I am raising Kickstarter funds as of now and leaving next week to shoot a feature documentary on real vampires in Transylvania. And I've been a little bit caught in between not having something that is a social documentary, so getting that interest and having something really popular like vampires, while it is a social issue and it is an inclusion issue in Transylvania anyway. So as far as applying for a Catapult, I've raised enough funds to go there and get the footage, but so that's we're at about 20,000 right now. About a week left on the Kickstarter. Would it make sense for me to apply to Catapult?
I don't see why not. I mean, so we are often the first money in, but we don't have to be. So it's not a requirement. So I guess to the different components of that, we're looking for great stories, and we don't sort of require that there's a social issue or a social impact strategy or anything. So that's not a problem. And certainly the fact that you're sort of getting started is fine. It really depends on how you want to use the grant and if it's, in our mission.
Okay, we're going to move on. So, Julie Parker Bonello co-founded Chicken and Egg Pictures in 2005 with a shared belief that diverse women storytellers have the power to catalyze change at home and around the globe. Chicken and Egg Pictures matches strategically timed nonprofit grants with dynamic mentorship and creative collaboration. And at Chicken and Egg, they have, supported some really important and recognized films, including Saving Face, which won for the short a few years ago at the Academy Awards in the short doc category, Freeheld, which also won, and Brooklyn Castle, don't know if people saw that, that's a fabulous film, Semper Fi, Always Faithful, Ai Weiwei, Never Sorry, The Square, Sonita, and Trapped. And the only thing I really want to say about all this is that I don't think any of those were by Bay Area filmmakers, except Trapped is now by a Bay Area filmmaker because she moved out here. So there's an East Coast international thing going on here. Earlier in her career, she produced a 2002 HBO documentary called Blue Vinyl, which she did in collaboration with another Chicken and Egg partner, Judith Helfand, who I just saw and looks fabulous. And she served as production executive for the distribution company called Nonfiction Films, and as an archival researcher for the Discovery Channel series Cronkite Remembers. She's a member of the board of directors of the Global Fund for Women, the San Francisco Film Society, and the Gruber Family Foundation. She lives in San Francisco with her husband and 2 daughters. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Well, the one thing I'll just kick off with is that I'm the only West Coast chicken. So the team is in New York. Judith Halfman, my dear collaborator and co-founder, and who's a wonderful filmmaker in her own right, and Wendy Ettinger, who's fellow co-founder and funder, they're both in New York. And we also have a fabulous executive director, Jenny Wolfson, who joined us 3 years ago. When Chicken and Egg started overtaking our lives, we brought in an ED, and she's been a wonderful collaborator. And we have a couple of program staff members, and the nest is growing. We've gotten bigger, but it seems to be Brooklyn-centric, and so I keep trying to get more peeps out here in the Bay Area. So hopefully the next hire will be in San Francisco, where I live. So I'll tell you a little bit. Chicken and Egg has evolved quite a bit in its 11 years. We co-founded Chicken and Egg in 2005, and it was just 3 of us, Wendy, Judith, and myself, and we thought there's not enough funding for women documentary filmmakers. And Judith really had the brainstorm and the idea that it's not just about the money, but it's also about creating community and also having mentorship and labs and workshops, that the combination of all of those things can really help catapult and propel projects forward. And I'd say oftentimes we are in collaboration on projects like Trapped and Call Me Cuckoo, and I'm sure there are many others. Although we also, we're only funding women filmmakers, so we miss out on all the men in the room. Sorry about that. But so a couple of years ago, we have had an open call for women filmmakers for these past 10 years, and have funded over 240 women filmmakers from around the U.S. and the globe. Not enough in the Bay Area, but I think there are a good 15 to 20 Bay Area filmmakers in that group, maybe more. And we have moved from our open call to 3 distinct programs. And that was really after undergoing strategic planning with our new executive director and our advisory board. We decided that we love being everything to everyone, but that we were at a point in our career at the organizational juncture where it actually would make sense to us to streamline our process. So we've launched 3 new main programs. The first one is our Accelerator Lab. That's for first and second time women filmmakers. And you have to be less than 40% shot to apply to that fund. It's open right now, so if anybody's in the room who's a first or second time women filmmaker, it's open until November 9th. And you just go to chickenandEggPigs.org and you can apply online. That grant is a $35,000 grant, and it goes to 10 women filmmakers. Or we do fund male, female, women co-directing teams, but the woman has to be clearly in, a co-director and sort of in the driving seat. And we can ferret that out, because occasionally it's not the case. Anyway, $35,000 grant, and then a year of labs and mentorship. The filmmakers, the cohort meets 3 times over the course of a year. It'll launch in April of 2017. This will be our second round. And there'll be 3 5-day workshops. April's TBD where that's going to be, if that's New York. And then June will be at Sheffield, where we bring the filmmakers and they pitch and they meet industry folks. And then again in October, and hopefully one of those will be in the Bay Area, those workshops. And then we really bring in industry and all sorts of experts in the field, including right here in front of us, to help the filmmakers all the way along from creating a trailer to editing to fundraising, distribution, festival, outreach, engagement, like sort of soup to nuts from beginning to end. The idea is really to help those 10 filmmakers fast track their projects. And it's interesting, we initially thought we'd only have it for first-time filmmakers, and then we thought, well, second-time filmmakers, sometimes that first project you have just killed yourself to make it, blood, sweat, and tears, and you don't even know quite how you did it, but you pulled it off, and maybe it took 10 years or whatever. And the second time that those filmmakers would have a lot to share with the first-time filmmakers, and that they might actually be able to do it in a slightly more sustainable way the second time around. So Judith pushed hard to include second-time filmmakers in that. So that's the Accelerator Lab in a nutshell. And then we launched another program called our Breakthrough Filmmaker Award. You know, one of the conversations that's been happening in the documentary community is this whole idea of having a sustainable career, and you know, how do you really make it as a filmmaker and not have to teach or make branded content or figure out other ways to, you know, supplement your income. And so we really wanted to create an award to an artist, to a filmmaker. And yes, she had to have a project she was working on, but really this award is to her as a working artist or filmmaker. So this is actually by nomination. So we've gone out to 50 folks in the industry to nominate one woman filmmaker. And for this award, it's a $50,000 award. We have 5 of them, so it goes to 5 women filmmakers. They get a $50,000 grant to them. And then, but they do have to have a project that they're working on, a documentary project. And then they get a year of very personalized sort of individual mentorship where we bring in creative capital and we bring in folks to think about how do you build a business plan for yourself as a filmmaker. You know, do you want to be thinking about doing short form or branded content, commercial work? If so, how do you break into that? More and more we're kind of going in that direction. And that is over the course of 12 months. And it's really what the filmmakers come to us and say, this is what I really need help with. This is what I don't understand. And we don't always know the answers, but then we go out to the field and experts and we find those people who can help with that. So that launched last year and we'll launch again at Sundance. We're in the review.
Can you tell us who you give to?
Sure, last year, yes, I can. Urupa Richen received
okay.
one, and Michelle Stevenson, who did American Promise, and Christy Jacobson, who just did Solitary, Julia Reichert, Lion in the House and other projects, and she's on the older end of our breakthrough. You have to have not done more than 3 feature-length documentaries to be eligible for that award. And I'm missing one person. Oh, Elaine Sheldon McMillian. I don't know if any of you know her. She's a really interesting filmmaker working in Appalachia who's doing a lot with the combination of documentary footage and animation and archival footage. She did a project called American Hollow, and she's very interested, particularly in the region that she's based, and does some really cool stuff. So, and on the younger end, like in her 20s. So the Breakthrough Award ranged from 20s to close to 70. So you can still be breaking through it at 70. Yeah, it is. So those are those 2 programs. And then the third major program is called our Impact Innovation Fund. That to date has been a little bit more discretionary, but we're kind of interested in exploring, VR and episodic and short form. And so we did one grant to a VR project last year called 6x9 about a solitary confinement cell. It was a New Frontiers at Sundance last year, just to kind of dip the toe in, and that was a project with The Guardian. We've also got a partnership with the New York Times OpDocs where we fund women filmmakers to make short form pieces for OpDocs, for the New York Times. And we're interested in episodic, and so we're just batting that around right now. If in 2017 we might actually do a call for episodic work. So that's in the works, I would say.
By episodic, do you mean more than one piece?
Yes. So it would be a series, and probably for the web.
Yeah.
So just because of budgets and whatnot, but it would be, Judith right now is doing an episodic piece called Love and Stuff that grew out of an OpDoc. And so the idea is sort of something that would play out over, let's say, 5 or 6 10-minute pieces or something like that. And I would say the other thing I would just add is that we always have an eye to, really having diverse voices behind the camera. I mean, and helming the project. So, we really care who's telling the story. And to Lisa's point, the access, like why this particular filmmaker to tell this story. And so that, because, that's really important to us when we look to see, who's telling the story and why, and that diverse voices and all the, racially, ethnically, socioeconomically, LGBT, geographically, across the board, like who's telling the story, and we want to support diverse voices. So I think that covers it in a nutshell.
We have some questions from the women in the room. Yes.
Hold on. We want a mic down. Excuse me, where's that hand? Okay. Please speak into the mic.
For the funding for the Impact Innovation Fund, how much is on average goes out usually per project?
Yeah, those grants have been a bit smaller. They're in the sort of $10,000 to $15,000 range. We've been kind of piloting it this year. So I think next year you might likely see an open call from Chicken and Egg on that. So, sign up for our newsletter, because then you'll be alerted when, new funds and new initiatives become available. But they've been around 10 to 15K.
For the Accelerator Lab, I was just reading the guidelines around the work sample.
Yes.
So I was a little bit confused. So
Okay.
they're asking for, I think it's like 5 to 20 minutes, and then additional 30 minutes. I don't have it in front of me, but it was a little bit confusing. Is it one or the other, or do we need to show both?
I believe it's just the 5 to 20 minutes, but the best thing to do is email Sabine at chickeneggpicks.org. Sabine Fayu-Cantayo is our program associate, and she manages the Accelerator Lab.
Okay.
So she can clarify, any questions on the length of the footage.
And what are you looking for? Are you looking for like character development, or like right now I have like a trailer with scene selects after?
We've always been open to trailers or scenes. Sometimes actually scenes can be even more revealing.
Right.
So I think we're open to both. I mean, whatever footage you feel best represents your project. And that can definitely be scenes. It doesn't have to be a, really tight, cut-together trailer.
Okay, thank you.
Is Sabine Sabine?
Yes, she is. Yes, Sabine at chickeneggpicks, PICS.org.
Our next question is over here.
Hi.
Hi.
So we're both graduate students at the Berkeley School of Journalism making documentaries, and I feel like that puts us in kind of a funny position with some funders, in the sense that like we're students, but we're also graduate students, and so I'm just wondering how you guys deal with that. Deal with films that are made in school, but also by adults. You know what I mean?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we haven't funded student films per se, but it sounds like there's a little bit of a gray area there, since you're grown-up students. So I have to get back to you on that about the graduate school question.
We have a question from a young man here in the front.
I'll be a woman for the moment.
Okay.
So when we're talking about diversity,
Yeah.
I have a disability.
Yeah.
And I have this growing sense of a real crest of a wave starting to come from a lot of filmmakers with disabilities. And so when you have your laundry list of diversity, you have to think of us also. And it goes beyond just knowing that we're out there.
Yeah.
But is that workshop going to be accessible to people with disabilities? Is your networking event on the ground floor? Is it going to be welcoming to people with disabilities? And so this is wide-ranging, from funders to filmmakers themselves. I think a lot of us working in documentaries are very much about social justice. So when thinking about who you're adding to your team, we're a population that usually is just not even thought of.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing that. I neglected to also say disability, and we've just funded a filmmaker, Jen Brea, and she's had all sorts of issues with health issues, and that are part of her film Canary in a Coal Mine. So we're definitely cognizant of that. But I think it's always a good reminder, because I think sometimes people don't think about it as accessible, and so I think you should say that at every meeting you go to, because it's a good reminder, to everybody in the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to be mixing Canary, and it's a great film.
Awesome. Okay, well, there we go.
Okay, the next question is from Sabade over here.
So when you say 40% shot, I mean, there are some projects. Actually, I have a project. It's a character-driven documentary, Veritas style, so I had to actually follow the characters over a year. And like I had the full access. So, I mean, I assume that's going to be 80% or 70% of the finished documentary, but there was no way that I could wait, just do 40% and wait.
Right.
So I wonder if that is eligible or could be
Well,
eligible.
I think we put that percentage on there, and obviously that's a little bit up to the discretion of the filmmaker, right? To be like less than 40% shot. The idea was that you, because you would be going through this year of mentorship with a cohort of filmmakers, that you would all be kind of in the first stages or the first third of your project, give or take. And so if people were sort of too far along, that they might not benefit from all of the labs and workshops in the. So that's really where that 40% came from. I would say it sounds like if you're 70 or 80%, you might be a little bit far along for the accelerator lab. But you could, poor Sabine, she's going to get so many emails tomorrow. But you could email Sabine and just ask her. But it sounds like you might be a bit further along than for this particular lab.
Do you have like any other grants for projects that are a little bit further?
Maybe, oh, you're further along, right. At the moment, we have that accelerator lab that's open call. The breakthrough is nomination, and the impact innovation currently is more in the pilot discretionary stage, but that will likely go open call next year. So we don't, but I mean, obviously there are all the usual suspects, right? The Sundance Documentary Fund and Cal Humanities over here, and who else? CineReach, I think, are they still doing an open call? Or?
I don't think
They're not.
I don't think they do open.
Yeah.
Tribeca.
Tribeca has.
We have a few more questions here.
Hi, I was wondering the relationship with the other entity you've created, Game Changer Films, and how that might relate.
I need to get that out of her.
She told me my bio was too long, so I had to cut it all out.
It's just, well,
okay. So, I mean, it kind of grew out of chicken and egg. I mean, what I care passionately about is that there are more women behind the camera and behind, helming projects in all forms, documentary, fiction, episodic, VR, whatever form. A little bit, although my love and passion is documentary. So the Game Changer Fund grew out of chicken egg. People would come to us and say, what are you doing for women fiction filmmakers? And we'd be like, that's not our expertise, and that costs a lot more money. But we shared an office at that point with Impact Partners, with Dan Kogan and Gerald Dreyfus, and they were interested in doing something in this space for women fiction directors. So we launched a fund 3 years ago. We raised a bunch of money from a bunch of different investors and individuals to invest. It's a for-profit entity that invests in fiction films by women directors. And that fund, it's a 3-year fund, and so we're just sort of coming to the end of it. There's still a little bit more money to invest in projects. So if you have a script, we like to see on that end a script, a budget, obviously director and a producer attached. And so the further along you are, I've been kind of learning the lingo and the fiction space. The further you're kind of packaged, the better. That's what they call it, packaging.
So besides Landco, what has Game Changer Films invested in?
We did a film called The Invitation by Karin Kusama. Jamie Babbitt's from Fresno. We've just done, we're doing actually one interesting, Jennifer Fox, who's a documentary filmmaker, has a fiction film that's based on her true life story called The Tale, and that's finishing up right now. So we have a couple of documentary filmmakers migrate over to the fiction space.
Do you ask them to write with that?
I am like Lisa, occasionally invest in things outside of, so that was Jill Soloway's project, and I was an investor in EP on that project before Game Changer existed.
Our next question is here, Julie.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. When I was in Los Angeles at the documentary conference last week, I heard a piece of news, and it may or may not be true, that Chicken and Egg is interested in a reinvigoration fund, which would be for, and this is only what I vaguely heard, that you're interested in women who may be returning to documentary filmmaking after having been parents for a while or doing other things in other parts of the industry. And I was just interested if that were indeed an initiative that Chicken and Egg was thinking of developing, because it's not clear in these three that you have right now.
Well, I know Jenny Wolfson and Judith Elfand were at the Getting Real. I was actually not there this past weekend, or this past week. So it's entirely possible that something was hatched while I wasn't around. Well, I mean, I think we have talked about, how do you juggle, being a parent, being a filmmaker, sometimes, having to go out and get a, paying job at a HBO or, or PBS or something. So that sounds like it would be in line with our mission and, kind of the holistic approach we have. But I can't say that it's been like signed off on, by the whole team. But I'm curious about that. I'll follow up. Reinvigoration Fund, yes.
Our next question is over here. You had your hand up. Thank you.
Hi.
We'll take two more questions. You want one more question. Go ahead.
Okay. I know on the application there's a place where filmmakers are supposed to check off what topic best represents their film. And I also noticed that the topic of my film was also the topic of two films that were funded 2 years ago. And I'm just wondering if you are at a disadvantage if you're trying to diversify the topics that are covered by your grantees, or if it doesn't matter?
No, not at all. That's a great question. We funded 8 films around reproductive justice and reproductive rights. We saw a spate of films when Roe v. Wade, the 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, so we saw a lot of different films, including Trapped, come our way. And as Judith always says, there's no one cinematic bullet. It actually takes a number of films over a period of time to break through on these issues. So, and I would say we have an eye, certainly have, looking for character-driven films that will drive towards social change, but we do also fund artful films like Amma Haral's Love True, or we funded a hybrid doc narrative film called A Woman Like Me. But we do also have an eye towards the sort of traps of the world that we're trying to exemplifies and whatnot, where we're sort of driving towards social change. But to your point, we also saw a series of films around incarceration and criminal justice. So we've actually funded about 7 or 8 films that deal with various aspects of criminal justice. So I would say you're not at a disadvantage. That we see, it's really about the film and the filmmaker, and there may have been films that came before, but there will also be films that come after. So go for it.
Okay, David, there's one more hand.
One more hand up here. Oh,
Way up there.
that's okay. This is good exercise.
So I am in media making, mainly online video production, but I'm trying to get more back into storytelling. And I actually am filing a nonprofit with a co-founder of mine who's more in the educational space. And with that, we've formed together some programming for a nonprofit. And one of them is a series, a documentary series about locals here in the Bay Area. But it is tied to my nonprofit. Is that something that would be problematic for submission for any of your programs, specifically for the episodics that you were talking about?
I don't think that would pose a problem. Okay. I'm trying to think, because you'd be kind of a nonprofit grant to a nonprofit. Generally, we grant to a fiscal sponsor, okay, like a Women Make Movies or an IDA or San Francisco Film Society, and then the grant goes on to the filmmaker. Occasionally, we grant directly to an LLC or a 501c3, so I think that would be fine.
Okay, excellent.
I don't
Thank
think
you.
that would be an issue.
Okay. Thank you, and we're now going to move on to John Lightfoot of Cal Humanities, who I can personally attest to is a fabulous senior program officer at Cal Humanities, since they have funded me. John manages the California Documentary Project, and that is a competitive grant program for film, radio, and interactive media, dealing with subjects that have humanities as part of the themes and relate to California. Prior to Cal Humanities, he produced, directed, and taught documentary film in the San Francisco Bay Area and was a staff producer of arts and cultural productions at Twin Cities Public Television in St. Paul. He has an MA in American Studies from Brown University and an MFA in cinema from San Francisco State, and he lives in the East Bay with his wife and 2 daughters.
And I'm a Virgo.
He didn't include that, but I'm telling you.
I'm a Virgo. Thank you. Abby and I used to be neighbors.
Yeah, so I at least know his family lineup.
Excuse me, thank you. So I am getting over a bit of a cold. I apologize if my voice sounds funky and if I might have a defective mic, if you hear me. Yeah, I know, exactly. Anyway, apologies in advance. So yeah, so I manage the California Documentary Project, and we have a deadline coming up November 1st. We're still on the annual deadline cycle. I'm really interested in hearing other people's experiences with rolling deadlines. We're not quite there yet. But so we fund, as Abby said, film, audio/radio, and interactive projects. They can be web-based series for pretty much agnostic in terms of the form it takes. But the key points to sort of hit home on are there has to be some connection to California. It has to be illuminating something about a California subject and issue. But it can't be so localized that it doesn't reach beyond this state. They're California subjects and issues of national relevance. And so that's important to consider as you craft a proposal to us, is saying, yeah, this might be a very narrowly focused project, but does it resonate with these larger themes, these sort of macro themes that are universal? And that's where the humanities come in. So all our projects have to have some sort of humanities component. And the humanities need to provide context, depth, and perspective, and oftentimes that's through the research you're doing as a media maker, but it's also through your collaboration with advisors. And we can talk about that more if you'd like to. It's pretty spelled out in our guidelines, however, so, but if you have questions, you're welcome to contact me at any time. This year we have grants, as we have for the past few years, R&D grants for up to $10,000 and production grants up to $50,000. We also have a public engagement grant program that's happened. We've made a number of rounds of grants through that program, but it's sort of fallow, stagnant, dormant at the moment. And we plan to bring it back.
You're reinvigorating.
We're going to bring it back, but we're just thinking about how we do it. Exactly.
We're going to help him.
Thank you. I was good at sort of moving the ball along. That's good. So that's basically what we have to offer. It's important, I think, in a setting like this to talk about what the organization is, because the California Documentary Project is only one thing that we do. And we're an independent nonprofit and a state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So we're not a California state institution or organization, which is important to keep in mind, I think. Our mandate is to serve the state of California, which is why, since the organization was founded back in 1975, we have supported media, seeing as media being a means by which the content can be disseminated, distributed broadly, and be made very accessible. So really, since the organization was founded, funding documentary was sort of in the DNA of the organization. And that continues. And though it continues, and it continues to the tune of about $400,000 a year through the California Documentary Project Grant Program, it's really important to note that we're not a media organization, we're a public humanities organization. So our emphasis is on the story you're telling, the content, and how you're contextualizing that, how you're communicating that, and then ultimately how other people can come to understand that subject or issue. We have, as I said, made about $400,000 worth of grants for the past 5 years to about 15 projects around. The grant amounts range, the production grants range from about $20,000 to $50,000. Most people apply for the full amount, but if you're funded, it'll be somewhere in that range. Yep. And deadline November 1st, grants will be announced in early March. It's a long, thoughtful, thorough process that involves many people in the review. I often have to say I'm not the decider by any means on this. We use former grantees and current grantees as peer reviewers, and sort of media professionals, field professionals to also help adjudicate the proposals.
Okay, so John, say a little bit more about if you're applying for a production grant.
Yes.
There is a requirement that you submit some kind of a clip.
Absolutely.
So tell us at what stage you're really funding.
Okay, so we like to say our sweet spot is early production and probably mid R&D. right? So the differentiation, as we all know, there's a lot of gray area between R&D and production. But for us, the real difference is whether you have some media to show that adequately represents the project the way you want to represent it, right? So you've got something you think sort of does justice to what you're proposing. We ask for a recommended 10 minutes of some sort of sample work, totally open to what that might be. Could be, interview excerpts. It could be a scene assemblies. It could be a trailer with a nice beginning, middle, and end. We're used to seeing things at all different stages of development. And in a way, just to put this out there, if our emphasis is on the content and we want to be early-ish funders, we place more emphasis on the proposal itself than the media sample you're applying. And that the intent behind that is to say, have you fully thought through the story you're telling and fully understand the project? And really importantly, are you asking the right questions? We're kind of all about questions. So what is your line of inquiry there, as opposed to saying, this is the conclusion I've already reached and I'm going to tell you about it through this film. It's really, what are the questions we're asking and how are we going to use this process of producing this film to explore that and then ultimately communicate it. And I hope I answered your question.
I want to say one other thing. Cal Humanities, while they don't do, it's not a mentorship program, they do an annual convening of all the people who've been funded by them. And that's a very supportive moment. I mean, it goes on for maybe a day or a half a day, but it's a chance for all the media makers to get together in the same room and sort of share what they're doing. And although I don't know that it was ever started as a means of building community, I actually think it has helped build community among those of us who've been funded by them. So, sort of hats off to them for that. One other question, John. Yeah. I have always been struck when I look at the, 10 or 15 films that you fund, that your definition of humanities is extremely broad. So I want you to, I don't know whether it's the Fishbone film or take some kind of way out there film that one would not normally think the Cal Humanities would have funded, and tell us why you funded it.
Okay, let me give my sort of humanities spiel just a little bit. Okay, so when everybody thinks about the humanities, they think about the various disciplines, history, philosophy, art history, things like that. All absolutely appropriate. But we see those coming into play in three different ways, both in terms of how you're informing yourself about the subject you're producing. And so you have what my former professor Bill Nichols called peripheral vision. So you would be able to say, in the interview with somebody, or when you're, experiencing something while you're producing, it could trigger some other knowledge that you have because you've done your research in advance. Everybody becomes, to some degree, an expert on their subject as you're producing this project, but there's always a different perspective or a broadened perspective that could be beneficial. So that's in the development. Or it's in the piece itself. We by no means require you to have those, expert authorities in the piece, providing context or things like that. You certainly can, but we don't require it. But probably most importantly is what you anticipate the audience is going to take away from it. What you're communicating to an audience and what do you want to trigger in that audience. So I'll use The Last Day of Freedom as an example.
How many people here have seen it? Okay, a handful. Tell them
so
what
animated piece based on an interview with a gentleman who turned his brother in for committing a crime.
Brother gets executed.
Believing he was going to get the help he needed. Instead, he was convicted, tried, and executed. And so he's reflecting on this, on this ethical issue. So you come away from it sort of asking those questions, what would I do, And that's that's a really great response. As opposed to having it sort of all tied up in a neat little bow, it's kind of like, what if that were me? What would I do? So yeah, I think that's a good example.
But that's one good example. I mean, the reason I think it's a good example is because it really, what I would say about Last Day of Freedom is that it broke a lot of the forms, and it brought us into a film in a completely different way, and it's really a piece of art as well as a piece of documentary. So great that you funded it. But I still want you to, I don't know enough about the Fishbone movie. That's why it's stuck in my head. Take another film that, again, is at the far reaches of what one might think sitting here fits a humanities profile.
All right, Fishbone quickly. Are people familiar with the film Everyday Sunshine, the story of Fishbone?
Okay, tell people who Fishbone is.
Fishbone is a band from Los Angeles that, who as kids were bused from their African-American communities to white communities. And they say that's the foundation for this musical hybrid that they developed, this sort of punk-funk hybrid. And the filmmakers were really smart, and they said to us, this is not just a behind-the-music, band bio. This is actually placing this musical form in some sort of social, cultural context and use the film to explore larger themes. They did a subsequent screening tour, community colleges throughout California, where they're using pop culture as a means to look at questions of race and class. And so that was one sort of package thing for us that worked really well. The other project I'd point out is Seeking Asian Female, which I don't know if people have seen, is Debbie Lum's film, that still to this day has caused the longest amount of internal arguments of any project that I've seen. And at the end of 45 minutes of debating this internally as a staff, I think I raised my hand and said, wait, if we've been talking about it this long, isn't that a really good sign?
Isn't that a good thing? Yeah.
And you think this?
Chicken and Egg supported that one
Did
too.
you? Yeah.
Bay Area
Same
filmmaker.
experience?
No, we did that one right away.
And so just something like that generates that kind of heat within a I don't know, a review process, but just in the general public as well, I think is a good sign.
So I want to underscore the thing he said about questions. How is your film going to raise questions with audiences up and down the state of California? Because if you can answer that question well and in an interesting way, you're likely to get their attention. That doesn't mean you'll get their funding, but you'll at least get their attention. Okay, do we have questions for John? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. These might be very specific questions pertaining to film. I'm working with a local filmmaker. I'm co-producing a film. I think Michelle reached out to you, John, to figure out whether we're the project's a right match. So about 40% of our film takes place in California. We started a preliminary, very, very preliminary shooting at the 60%, which is happening in Lowell, Massachusetts. And we're vacillating, do we apply for an R&D for the California side of the project, because we haven't begun our shooting yet, but we've definitely have started our R&D on this, and we're probably mid R&D. And because of that, I guess for the sample, we only have video footage from a different location. However, the film covers the topic around kind of the universality of trauma. That's culturally responsive, and how does integrative health really help heal refugee and immigrant communities. So very specific to California, as well as nationally, particularly in this time where a lot of that is being threatened.
So the California-ness of a project is definitely a consideration, but I think it's really important to note, and I'm sure we all take the same approach on this, even though we all have these requirements that you need to satisfy in order to apply or be eligible or be competitive, we really want to take a holistic view of the entire project. And if it's got 1 foot in California and 1 foot elsewhere, that's totally fine. It happens all the time. And things tend to balance themselves out in the proposal if it's not 100% California-based. There are plenty of projects that we've supported that speak to some degree to a California ethos or a California concept that's been successful. Project, you guys, Mark Kitchell's A Fierce Green Fire, for example. I mean, he said this is a project that speaks to something that originated here in California. The film doesn't take place in California, but it was enough to sort of tap into that historical vein. I hope I'm answering your question. Seeking Asian Female, again, is another question. It's not saying anything inherent about California. The characters just happen to be here. But it was grounded enough in that context to work.
Right, and I guess the other part is around for the sample.
So the sample
is not because we're not there yet.
That's totally fine.
And then are we applying for production or for R&D? I mean, I think we have a lot, and I could talk to you afterwards too about more details.
Let me give one other example, though. This might illuminate something there. So a fantastic project we supported 2 years ago. I think a number of other people have come on it now. It's called United Skates.
Yeah.
So their footage was all outside of California, but it was so dynamic and so just like energizing that wasn't even a concern. So I mean, I think it can certainly happen if you're proposing to produce the California material. That's totally legit. That's
We have a question over here first, so let me just run up here because it's good for me. Where's that person? Okay. By the way, we're funders too, Berkeley Film Foundation. We're going to get Abby to talk about that.
I actually thought about that. Who in this room's been funded by BFF? Okay. How many people who have not been funded by BFF are East Bay, from anywhere from Oakland to Richmond? We're going to have a short conversation about BFF in a minute. Go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, how many films do you fund that are about women's issues?
About women's issues, or all of us?
For John.
Me? I don't have the actual number, but a lot. Absolutely. I should say, just in terms of subject matter, we place absolutely no limitations whatsoever on subject matter. It's more about how you're approaching the subject than what the subject is.
Thank you. We have a question over here. Thank you.
So if you're going to be having your first shoot like 2 days after the deadline, how lenient are you on getting the sample, the video sample a few days after deadline? Do you have leniency on that?
To all applicants, it really needs to be in by the
Okay.
deadline.
All
Admittedly, there's a little period of limbo between application and, when announcements are made, and that's just kind of the nature of the business. Sorry.
That's okay.
What do you think? Another couple questions?
Yeah, let's finish. Huh?
What is a clarification?
Sure.
For R&D,
Hold on, Sarah, please speak into the microphone.
this is just a clarification. For R&D proposals, you don't need a sample, you just need previous work.
Exactly. Yep.
Previous work and the proposal.
And the
Well,
proposal,
yeah.
but no
No, and you're
production
welcome.
you need
You're
sample.
welcome to submit. I think as Lisa was saying, you're welcome to submit material if you have it. Though I got to admit, I have seen that backfire on occasion, whereby people are just saying like, "Ooh, yeah, this is
Too much.
too much." Yep.
Yeah, R&D is tricky. You have to have more than an idea, but
That's right.
What would you recommend for first-time filmmakers? And is this an appropriate venue for first-time filmmakers?
Technically, you have to submit a prior work as evidence of your ability to pull off the project you're proposing. But if if you team up with somebody with more experience and that, they're mentoring, they're providing guidance like that, that could work. The Last Day of Freedom filmmakers were first-time filmmakers. They'd done video work, but they'd never done their own full-length piece. So there are opportunities, but you have to make sure you have that experience on the project team in some way.
Could that be an advisor or?
Probably more hands-on than that.
Hands-on, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, exactly. Key role.
Hi, I'm a first-time, I'm working on a fictional narrative, and so far, all of you are exclusively working on documentary grants. I'm wondering, Abby, is that going to be, is there a category at all for grants for narrative? No. This is all.
Well,
Yeah.
You guys.
I can speak to that, putting on my San Francisco Film Society, asking Lisa that the Rainin grants, I would highly encourage you to go to sffs.org, sanfranciscofilmsociety.org, because they have the largest fund for nonprofit grants to fiction filmmakers, and they do everything from screenwriting all the way through to completion. And it's kind of unusual in the fiction world to have sizable nonprofit grants. So definitely check it out. It's the Kenneth Rainin Foundation grants at Film Society.
One more question? Yes. Excuse me.
I guess my question is about if we do apply for R&D funds and let's say production starts happening faster than we expected, like how specific are you guys sticklers for like really using the R&D money for that? Or is there like some sort of flexibility if it carries over?
There's certainly flexibility. If you need to make adjustments to your project, you just communicate with us, and depending on how big a change it is, it may require some sort of official notification. Otherwise, it's just like, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
We know that when you apply to us, any early funder knows when you apply to us, things are going to change. It's just how dramatically things change.
Okay, thank you.
Do we want one more question?
one more question, then I'm going to say a few words about BFF.
Is there any more questions for John? Yes? No? Go. Hold on, yeah, we're going to get there
We'll get to
too.
BFF in a second, that's right.
My question is, when you're looking at things, do you look at projects that are potentially going to make a profit, or if they're going to cost money? Say, for example, a music documentary. I mean, there's a lot of costs with licensing and so on, and so that's my question.
I don't know if I've ever thought a project was going to make money necessarily, but certainly the budget, just look at the budgets.
Right.
Do you want to take that, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a grant, so it's,
have to pay it back. No strings attached.
non-recoupable, so we're not looking that. We're not looking for, so it's about a profit at all. I mean, it's always, we want to think people want to go see it, but, it doesn't have to be not looking for blockbusters or anything like that.
I would just say to that we're looking for films that will, go to festivals and then have some sort of distribution, whether it's, PBS or Netflix or, everything in between, and then also working at the grassroots level where they're partnering up with organizations and, sort of moving the dial on an issue, doing educational screenings, that type of thing. So, like for us, if they have all three of those aspirations, and then that's always a plus.
Can I second that final point there, which is just, for us, the better articulation of how you're going to get their project beyond the festival, the broadcast, those networks, which are fantastic, we want to have, these projects reach, the better you can provide evidence of how you're going to get them beyond there, I think the better off you'll be.
And I think maybe we should just say something about a group like Impact Partners, because let me just say, as a documentary filmmaker, I've always been loath to go to somebody who was going to invest in my film because they're the first money back. I've never made any money on the back end. So it's like I'm incurring a debt there. I mean, you know what I mean?
I'll speak to that. I think, I'm largely in agreement with you, and there's certainly chicken egg filmmakers, that have taken equity in their projects. But I think there's certain films that warrant it, like, A Queen of Versailles or Blackfish, or, there's certain films where I feel like they can probably withstand a certain amount of equity, and they are going to make a distribution deal that will pay back the investors and, frankly, the filmmakers and producers. But there are a lot of projects that, if you can try to, do it through grants and Kickstarter, and, I think you're going to be better off in the long run. That's my feeling on the matter.
Maybe you'll have different views about it. I don't know if you have different views. Okay. So can I just say, I just want to say a couple of words about the Berkeley Film Foundation, because we are another local funder, and we fund heavily in the East, we fund exclusively actually in the East Bay, and we fund student films. So, but we don't fund until, April, May. So we're not going to help you right now, but you need to know about us, because we often fund student filmmakers to do part of their distribution. But for anybody who, what we need from you is a decent proposal and a 10-minute clip. And what I think we would all say is that to the extent that a clip sings in some really good way, you're going to get our attention. Because if we had somewhere between 60 and 80 films this year, they did not all sing. And so, and the world is getting more crowded with filmmakers, and there are more films being done. And, really the way any filmmaker stands out is to have a really good clip and a really good story and access. But the clip is your calling card in this business. I mean, it's what everybody here is sort of looking at, including the Grant Review Committee for BFF. So it's worth knowing that our deadline is what, David, when is it?
It's, we open up in April, we'll be opening up in April 2017, and we close at the end of, middle or end of May.
So it's like if you're working on something and you are headed towards a good 10-minute clip, just keep our deadline in mind. And so far, we've been funding at the $12,000 level, but we may, in fact, this year have a little bit more money and be able to bump that up. And we fund a couple of films at $20,000 and one at $25,000. So it's real money. And because we are geographically defined, it's actually in some ways a little bit less competitive, because they're funding, these two are funding nationally. And John's funding statewide at least, or people around the country who happen to have a California angle. So we're a good group to come to if you've got a project, because, you know, we want to see the best work that's being done in the Bay Area, and if it's good, we're likely to fund you. And we don't have any issue about if you came to us before and things have improved, you absolutely can come back to us a second time. And we often fund on the second submission.
Yeah.
So-
Great. Go BFF.
Yeah, go BFF, yes, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Give us more details about the panel review. How does it work?
About the pattern of review?
Panel review.
Panel review, you, for us? Yeah, you submit to us, it's an online submission. We so far have been able to do it with 6 reviewers. So, you know, we're sort of dividing up the initial review, and then we all look at the ones that rise to the top. And there's 6 of us, David and I are 2 of them, and then there are 4 other people so far who've been doing the review. And out of the films that we're likely to fund, we then try to figure out, you know, which are the, quote, most worthy, because then they get the higher awards. There's something called the Sol Zantz Award. There's something called the Al Bendick Award. Do we have another award? No, I think those are our 2 big ones.
And where are the other 4?
Who are the other 4 people? You want to know who they are? The other 4, Gail Silva, Sonia Childress, who's been associated with Stanley Nelson on the Black Panthers and all his other films. And this year she wasn't able to do it. We had Vivian Kleiman. And we have a woman named Cheryl Dunye, who's a professor at, I think, California College of the Arts.
State.
San Francisco State, sorry, she used to be at CCA. And Julia Robertson. So that's who, those are our, and we're a very stable group. We've worked with each other since this thing began. And, you know, and we've funded over $1 million in films. I mean, we've given out over $1 million, and we funded over 100 filmmakers. So, but definitely people in the East Bay need to come to us. And you want to talk about Oakland?
Yeah, we just came into Oakland for the first time this year. We had 2 grants. We're hoping to continue into Oakland. I think we'll be able to get the board to agree to that. Thank you. The difference, though, between Berkeley Film Foundation and our other funders is annually we do give a little less. We just give around 140 to 160 per year. So that does limit us. And we actually got in 114 applications this year because we went into Oakland. We're usually at around 60. We had 114 this year.
Yeah, okay, we now have hands.
We have questions for Berkeley Film Foundation?
Okay, well,
Or anybody?
Okay, go ahead.
You're first. Okay, go ahead.
Just quickly, are you guys early or late money?
We're mid-money. We want you to be in production. So we fund production, we even like post-production better. Because one of the issues for us has been, you know, getting the films finished. Right now, our track record is not bad, but there are some films that we funded that may never see the light of day. And we don't want too many on that list. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like we're not giving enough money for anybody to finish their film. So, you know, if you're just completing production and you're moving into post and there's a rough cut that we can see a good 10 minutes of, that's kind of ideal for us. Because we'd much rather be helping you get to the finish line. But we do fund production. I mean, I would say at least 30% and maybe more has been production. What we don't do is the early stuff that Lisa and the Catapult Fund do. We do not fund at that stage. But that's what's good about all of us here, is that we all fund at different stages. We're looking for different things, other than the fact we're all looking for good films. Yeah.
Can I add on to that? Though it does make it potentially very difficult for those applicants who have to tailor their submissions for every single funder. But a big part of the conversation at IDA last week was the common application.
We're going to go to a common app?
A core application.
Core,
Yeah.
For those of us with children who applied to college, we know how that works.
So
it was good. It was really good.
It's really, well, so yeah, it's not a common app where you get to just check off a bunch, but a core application so that there's like a basic application and then different funders can add a couple questions or, you know, tailor it.
I wasn't at that meeting. Do me a favor. If you go to it, would you let the Berkeley Film Foundation know, please?
Yeah, well, it's going to be, it's going to be the IDA, so you can actually opt in through the IDA to the
well, we
common
need to look at that.
core application.
That's great. More questions from the audience? For us or any of the other panelists? Where are we? Tano, is that you or no? Somebody? Ah, okay. Slowly but surely.
The core application.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, how's it going?
Makes life
I'm
easier.
working on my second fiction feature, and just finished the script writing phase to where now I'm kind of going to send it out to different financiers and possibly try to do a lab or two. My question is, while I'm waiting for that feature to get funded and to get some backing behind it, I am considering making a short or shooting a scene from the film, from the script. Any advice on what the kind of best next steps would be for a script that is looking for funding, one. Two is basically in a place where, in order to prove the validity of the story, I would need to create something that's shorter form. And so I'm trying to figure out the best next steps with that.
Is it a dramatic script? Is it a?
Yeah, it's like a sci-fi drama.
Okay, so that's not really in our.
Yeah, it's not so much in
Not
the
really
wheelhouse.
what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, again, look at that, the Film Society,
Yeah.
or also Film and.
Oh yeah, it actually
Because they have.
I did get the screenwriting grant from SFFS.
Oh, you did? Great. Okay,
So
well, that's
so
cool.
I'm just wrapping that up right
good.
now.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think about next steps.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
also
I would
Film
call-
Independent has
Film
those
Independent in LA.
labs. Yeah. Yeah.
And of course
Yeah.
Sundance,
And,
right.
And film, IFP also.
Yep.
In
So
New
they're,
York. Yeah.
are you writing those down? IFP,
Yeah, I
Sundance, and
submitted to
Film-
Film Independent and Sundance for
Okay.
January and February, so I mean, hopefully I'll get it, and we'll see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Hi, Abby. Getting back to narrative, fiction movies again. Berkeley Film Foundation funds fiction or hybrid fiction and doc?
We really haven't. And the reason is because people haven't come to us. Yeah, I mean, it's like we need to see something and people come to us with a script. We're not competent to judge a script. So we have not, David, am I right? We have not eliminated
No, it's
narratives.
30 minutes or less for a narrative.
30 minutes or less for a narrative, but you got to show us something.
Yes. You gotta have footage.
You gotta have footage.
something in it.
So, Ro, that's a good possibility for a short, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I have a feature done. This is my second feature, so I did my first feature, and now I'm looking for funding for my second one. But if you fund shorts,
But we fund, again, you have to have really 10 minutes of the film shot.
of the actual film.
Of the actual film. We're not funding based on last time's movie.
We have a question here.
Hey, I'm doing a documentary on a satirical group called The Committee. It was based in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Alan is awesome. He's a great guy. And one of the challenges we're looking at is licensing. And I wanted to know, basically, if we got absolutely every clip that we wanted to get and we paid full price for it, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000. And that's a lot of money. And I wanted to know if that's something that you guys looked at, if you would look at that in an application and say, well, I don't know that we want to fund this because it might not get made at that level because that's a lot of money to actually pull together and fund.
Okay, I want to say.
That's to everyone on the panel.
But before they answer, because I'm not answering for us on that, I just want to say that when you're walking into a situation where you know it's going to be expensive, et cetera, your best investment is a $500 consultation with a fair use lawyer.
Yeah.
Because if you can figure out how to fair use a large chunk of what you've got your hands on, the price goes way down.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you've done that, I mean, hopefully it's not going to cost you $200,000.
Yeah, we anticipate we'll be able to do bulk work, and a lot of those guys are very close to the members of the committee, just because of their work in the industry. So probably get a good deal, I think. But
So I don't know, do people look at the cost of archival footage as a determinant? Do you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But the biggest issue is if the money isn't in the budget. That's what happens more often than not. So I don't think people would bat an eye. They might go, well, that's a lot of money, but it's realistic. Whereas if you hadn't put that
We didn't
in there-
include it.
Exactly.
Right.
That would be-
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would say just, yeah, we don't look, we don't really ask for a detailed budget for the film. We ask for sort of like what do you think it's going to cost kind of thing. So if it's a project where there's, for example, a lot of archival, or there's a huge amount of travel or something, then actually the budget should reflect that. We want to know it's a realistic budget. And one thing, just sort of, sometimes people ask, and it's not as though the lower the budget, the better.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't it's like, it really should be something that's reflective of what the film should cost. So that's not.
The other thing I would
Yeah.
add to that is that to definitely put yourself in as a line item, the director and the
Yeah.
producer, because oftentimes people don't. I think, I don't know what hazard to say, women maybe don't more often, I don't know, but I just think it's very important that you actually have a line item in there for yourself and that you can live and eat and breathe, and funders expect that and don't want to see you just slash your fee.
We have a question here.
This is for the Berkeley Film Foundation, so I should ask you, I suppose. Someone mentioned a documentary / hybrid narrative documentary. So, and David just said that for a narrative, it would be a 30 minutes maximum, I guess, film. So do you have any lengths that you would?
Let me just say we have never funded a hybrid. So
Okay.
and we've been in business 6 or 7 years, so
Okay,
I
that's
don't
a
know.
short time.
But I don't know how, that's, we really fund documentaries. And
Okay.
so if you had a hybrid, we would look at it, we would take it seriously, but we're not predisposed to funding a hybrid.
Okay, so there is nothing that says 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or
If
anything
you're
like
doing a hybrid, you could go into the documentary, it can be as long as you want it to be.
Yeah, but
As long-
then there is not a percentage. It should be 80% documentary and.
As I say, we haven't funded one yet, so we have no history with that.
But you have reviewed some, right?
We have not viewed, I don't know that anybody has submitted a hybrid film to us.
I did.
Checking.
Sorry?
What's the film called?
It's called Patrick's Dilemma.
Okay.
It's
Oh, it's coming back to me, baby.
It's a French-American film shot in Paris and San Francisco. Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely coming back.
But unfortunately, it's from Oakland.
Okay.
So they're not
Let's
too
talk
bad.
afterwards, and we'll talk about it, but it's, nothing's off the table.
Okay.
Okay.
And I just want to remind you that Oakland was very competitive this year. We only had 2 grants, 12,000 apiece, and we had 24 filmmakers apply. So don't feel bad. And like Abby said, apply again. In fact, I want to take this to another place and kind of discuss maybe what films we've all funded and what stuck out for us as to like why we funded that project. Like, did it hit us right away? John, could you say anything about something that you funded that just hit you right away?
Well, I mentioned that United Skates film, which is looking at the history and continuing culture around roller skating for African American communities throughout the United States. Roller rinks being gang-neutral territories in Los Angeles, being places of desegregation in the South. There's a history there, and really solid proposal, sound intellectually, and with a real kick-ass work sample that just sort of closed the deal for all the reviewers.
Incredible. Lisa, can you say something about a film that you funded in that same kind of vein?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind when you ask is the film Wiener. And the reason I bring it up is that, so they had just started and they didn't have any footage yet, but it was like, oh my God, this access was totally unique, that he was going to be right there. And of course, at that time, the second scandal hadn't happened yet when they started the film. But it was, that was really, I mean, an interesting character and situation, and but there was this access that I was like, yes.
Is he going to do a sequel after the third scandal?
I don't know, I think,
Yeah.
well, there's, and then there was, yeah, so the story keeps unfolding.
Yeah.
Julie, same question to you.
I would say, I would just want to say that United Skates is in our accelerator lab, so we're always informally, funding this kind of this ecosystem. So I think sometimes if you get one grant, it does help you also leverage other grants. So, so that's good. But not that you have to, though. Sometimes there are only films that one of us support. But Sonita, I think, is a film that we...
I don't know, say something about it.
Sonita is about an Afghani girl who immigrates to Iran, and she is a janitor at a school, and she dreams of becoming a rapper, but rapping for kind of women's equality, and she ends up, her mother comes from a humble background in Afghanistan, and they're quite poor in Iran, and her mother at one point tries to kind of sell her off as a child bride. And the filmmaker actually intervenes. There's a real interesting ethical question, for a documentary filmmaker to be an observer versus to be a sort of part of the story. And so actually Jenny Wolfson, RED, met her at IDFA and was so blown away by Roxara Gagamami, who also was living here in the Bay Area for a while, so she's sort of quasi, Bay Area Iranian filmmaker. But I think we were so struck by her relationship and her access to Sonita, and then the story touches on all sorts of issues: immigration, refugees, child marriage, and Sonita. Sonita actually came after Sundance and filmed, and actually at Women's Audio Mission came and recorded some songs. So she's been back here, and I helped sort of with part of that. So I think that's a film that I'm particularly, proud of us supporting.
I would, for our end, I would quote for Sweet Dreams.
Exactly. You read my
it's a
mind.
great film.
And I wanted you to talk about it, but I want you to tell the audience with the mic, and then I have a question for everybody.
Okay, so Sweet Dreams was the story of healing through drumming in Rwanda. So it was a women's drumming group, but it wasn't just about drumming. And women had not been, prior to the whole genocide, women had not been allowed to drum in Rwanda. And Lisa Fruckman, who's really an editor from Berkeley, had taken this on as the director-producer with her brother. And then there was a second part to the story, which wasn't only the drumming, but it was also about microenterprise. And the same group of women that were engaged in the drumming became entrepreneurs when they brought ice cream from Brooklyn to, it wasn't Kigali, but it's some other town in Rwanda. And so you are watching in this film what it's like to see a group of people who've never eaten ice cream before eat their first ice cream, and then be able to sustain themselves as part of this microenterprise, which essentially takes off. So that, to me, it was beautifully shot. It was, again, they had access. It was a story. If they had not made the movie, we never would have learned about it. And it just sort of the four legs of the table were all there by the time we saw the clip.
So what about if we go through something that can we figure out a project that we all funded?
I don't know if there is.
Real Boy.
Well, we did fund
funded
Sweet Dreams.
You did.
Over
Okay.
Chicken and
Did
Egg.
you,
So
John?
we
Did
have.
you?
We're two for here.
United
Real Boy,
Skates.
we did.
Real Boy.
We did.
How about
And a lot
Trapped?
more that we did.
Did everyone support Trapped?
We did Trapped.
Okay, we did
Yeah.
Trapped.
So we've got two, but we tend to, at least two of us up here are, behind some of the same films.
Okay, so not a silly question. What about, could you tell our audience the
Yes,
percentage
might as well.
of films that you fund out of all the applications that you get?
Say, what was the question?
The percentage of
Oh.
films that you fund per year, per cycle, versus the applications you get?
Okay.
Okay, you want to go first,
Well,
Lisa? Yeah, you probably have the most,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, so we fund about 20 a year, give grants for about 20 a year. We used to have two rounds and be sort of 10 each, and now it's rolling, so it's still 20. And we get about 1,000 applications.
See you guys? It's tough.
Yeah, now they're funding nationally, so.
And actually internationally as well. And that's, and one of the things, when you're talking about BFF, is that, a lot of times people say, well, people we fund or people we don't fund, where should I go and where to go? And I always recommend, you certainly go to the usual suspects, but also really see, are there funders that are particular to your film, either geographically or subject matter, or, so it's always a great idea to see, or sometimes it might be an organization that's interested in your issue, even if they're not a traditional film funder. So always try to see might work particularly for your film.
And did you tell us how many people you have on your review panel?
No, so we have, we've had up to 8 reviewers. We have a system of every project is read by at least 2 people. And then as it sort of progresses, more and more eyes on the project.
Julie, could you answer that?
So for our Accelerator Lab, we last year got about 410 applications, and we chose, and that's only women filmmakers, and we chose 10 of those. The breakthrough, the odds are better, but you do have to be nominated, and you can't nominate yourself, unfortunately. So there are 50 nominations, give or take, and then 5 awardees. And then, so we're funding about 20 projects through Accelerator, Breakthrough, and then the Impact Innovation Fund. And we do have outside reviewers or screeners for the Accelerator Lab. I think last year we had 8. And then at the semifinal round, I come in, the 3 co-founders and our executive director and our director of programs. So that make the final selection from the, let's say last 60 projects or so, 60 to 80.
And John, what kind of numbers are you getting?
Well, our parameters are fairly narrow on the front end with the California thematic focus and the humanities. So we actually calculated based on dollar amount, percentage of dollar amount as opposed to numbers of proposals because our grant amounts range. So we fund about 7% of what we receive.
So it's competitive all over. And I don't know what our numbers come out to, but.
It sounds like you have a
We're a
little better being regional, like the
Yeah.
Left Foundation,
Yeah.
which is New England-based, is only funding New England filmmakers. So I think Lisa's point is a good one to see kind of what's in your community and backyard, because I would say the odds are a little better at BFF.
They are, because we're
'Cause
funding
it's local.
between probably 10 and 15% of what we get.
Right, right. And is there anything here, I know you all fund at different stages, but we do encourage our filmmakers to apply again if they don't receive a grant. Is there an example that each one of you could give where this is the case?
You mean
Where
they
somebody
funded
came,
us on a second
no, where
time?
somebody came to you
Yeah.
the first time and you didn't approve, and then they came back again and you said, you know what, this looks a little bit better, we're going to fund it.
I mean, I'm trying to think of an example of that one, and it just, I'm blanking a little bit, but it definitely has happened. It's not I would say, so it's definitely happened, and a lot of times either maybe the project was a little too early and there was just not enough to go on yet, or again, the access question, the things had gelled a little bit. It's not the case that like the more you apply, the better the chances.
Yeah.
That's how I tried ITV.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's not that model. But there have definitely been times. I would say that after you've applied 3 times and you still haven't gotten the grant, then it's probably just not a good fit, and there's, not every project is for every funder. So there's great projects that we can fund or just not quite what we do, but there's going to be another funder where it is. So, but yeah, and I do, we don't, in terms, we always, people can always ask questions about the process, ask for feedback, particularly if you're going to reapply. The only thing that we don't do in terms of, I guess, feedback is we don't sort of pre-review applications. But other than that, we're really open to hearing from you.
Just want to take that?
Sure. We had supported a film called Private Violence by filmmaker Cynthia Hill. It's a film about domestic violence, and it's quite character-driven. The first couple of, I think she might have applied 2 or 3 times, and it was very, had a lot of talking heads and a lot of sort of news flashes and, percentages of people who've experienced domestic violence, and it just wasn't that character-driven or sort of verite or that compelling in that. So we gave her that feedback. We said, look, we really like the story was hard, but there's something here. There's a kernel of a story here in Deanna's story, but you need to strip away all this other stuff. And so she eventually did strip it away, and then we did give it a grant. So, and we ended up actually executive producing it, and it went on to HBO and had a great life. So.
The point I'd just add to that, and this is a fairly common thing I say in feedback calls to declined projects, is that the pool is different every single year.
Right.
And so you cannot predict how successful you'll be in the next round. We could have 10 projects about the same subject. We could, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I would say that, you know, even if you apply before, you're starting, it's an advantage because we already know about the project, but you're also starting from the same point with all the other projects in your pool. Yeah.
And one last question for me, and I'll open it up to the audience. In terms of feedback, we're very, very small, and we don't have the manpower to necessarily give feedback to every project. How do you deal with that?
This has been an ongoing discussion at Chicken and Egg for years, and Judith has always wanted to give feedback, at least to the finalists or the semifinalists. And it's you know, when you have 400 or 500 projects and you whittle down. So I think we do to the very final round of you know, because it's all in a database and all the reviewers log in all their comments. It's all, you know, digitized, and so we can access that information readily. But we can't offer it to everybody, so we just do it for that last sort of, you know, round of finalists.
You know, I like to be able to respond to requests for feedback. So sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes, you know, but I'm happy to get on the phone with somebody, and you know, so we don't give like extensive notes or anything, but you know, if you want to chat about the project and just sort of, I can sort of share some of the reviewers' comments, and just kind of give you a sense, like, was this, you know, was it just, it was the wrong stage, or was it just, you know, this is just not kind of a good fit for Catapult, or was it something else? So I try to respond to a lot of the requests, and then just sometimes it takes a while, or sometimes you know, I might say, you know, this, I try to respond.
Same thing. I mean, I try and give higher level comments, higher level feedback, because so many people are providing review comments that for me to synthesize all those and like pull out the little tidbits from each one is just really time consuming and difficult. That said, I think it's super important. You know, people have taken the effort to apply to us, and as much as possible, giving constructive feedback in exchange is the least we can do.
Are there questions from the audience while we have this great panel here? Anybody here? Another one from? Okay. We'll get you. Okay. Yes.
First off, thank you so much for making the time to chat with us today. Really interesting talk. So I was hoping that you guys could expand a little bit more on what you guys look for in terms of, as part of the application process around budget. I know you mentioned you don't look for super itemized. Lisa, you mentioned a little bit more. And as part of that, I was really happy to hear you mention something about for the filmmakers themselves, including a line item for that, because that's always been something I know personally I struggle with. When it's commercial work, totally different, no problem. Here's my rate. Well, moving on. But when you're working on films, it seems like, especially if it's low budget, independent, it's always a very difficult thing. So I wanted to hear your guys' perspective across the board for application, as well as just your approach to filmmakers and how they should think about, or recommendations around how they should think about their own, I guess, compensation, if you will, as part of the filmmaking process.
Sure, I will. Well, we do request a budget, that you attach a budget when you apply for the Accelerator Lab. And in the budgets really range, you know, from, I don't know, $100,000 up to, you know, I mean, I think we've seen projects in the higher six figures. And I think then we also look to see if others are on board yet or not. I mean, we sometimes we'll be the first in or follow Catapult and others, you know, it just all depends. I mean, I think I said it, I think it's important that you put yourself in there as a line item always, and your producer, and you know, this is a craft, and you know.
Wait, let me ask you this question. At what figure are you saying, okay, they're sort of under budgeting themselves, but at least they're in there? At $4,000 a month, is that too little? Does that make you think, okay, well, of course she's worth more, but you know, this is really, otherwise the budget goes through the roof. I mean, just how do you what's a line, not that everybody here should do whatever you're saying, I'm just curious how you think about it, because I don't actually know how to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it ranges, Abby, and I don't know if I necessarily want to put a figure on it, because it also depends a bit on the size of the budget and how much work and, you're doing other stuff. I mean, what do you think? You're a working director. I'll punt that back to you.
Okay,
I mean, what
I'll
do you
say,
think?
I put in, and I do it and I sort of cringe. I mean, I don't think I've ever put in for more than $5,000 a month.
Okay, so that would be
means that on a budget of-
$60K a year.
Yeah, but I mean, and it costs me more than that to live. But on any given, and it's very rare that someone's gonna write me a check that's gonna cover the full 60,000. You know what I mean? So I'm answering your question, because I feel like I don't know. And when it comes to outreach budgets, I'm in there for like 2,000 or 3,000 a month, even though I could be working on it full time. So I think what's going on in the field is that we put ourselves in for less than we really cost, and certainly for less than what a full-time job should be compensating us for. But I think we're all worried about a budget that reads in the $600,000 range. If we put in for the right amount, then the budget goes through the roof. So that's my experience as a filmmaker, is to try to balance. Of course, I have to be in there somewhere, but I don't want to send the budget through the roof. And then people think, well, this isn't realistic, because the reality is all of us are willing to work for what we can get out of a budget. We all do it, and that's why we sometimes take other jobs or whatever.
Yeah. What do you all, any other thoughts down there?
I advise people to apply with, if not their dream budget, the most realistic budget they could possibly imagine. Recognizing that at that early stage, it's all going to change as you go forward anyway. So in the same way, like you might see things that are almost $1 million in total budget, and others might be 200,000 or whatever it might be. Anything that within a realistic range is going to be.
So $1 million budget freaks out the Berkeley Film Foundation. I'm just here to tell you, we see $1 million budget, we're like, this is never going to happen, or whatever. So you're not freaked out by $1 million.
No, it's definitely on the high end, for sure.
Okay. But that's important to know. Don't submit a budget to us for $1 million and go right ahead.
If it, no, but the key thing is, does what's being proposed correspond to the budget? If it's like the monumental epic of, of the history of the Western civilization or something like that, that makes sense.
Yeah. Usually not. You asked, do we have to do outreach for you?
Yes.
Usually, we're trying to see what it's going to take to get the film produced.
Right. Yeah. But usually our funds are spent by the time you get around to that anyway, so it's an unfunded mandate. Can I just say one comment about our budget, which we changed this year, where we used to ask for a detailed line item budget for every allocation for the entire project. That's a monster, it's a beast, it's unnecessary. So we just want detail on how you're spending our grant funds. We want aggregate lump sums of what you anticipate spending on post, this, that, and the other thing, but just how our requested funds are allocated.
We have a question. Oh, you had one too?
It's really quick.
Okay.
Related to budget. So I know in our case, we have some support from the university, not a ton, but we do have a number of things that are in kind. And if we were incorporating that into a budget, say color correction, is that attractive to funders in the sense where it shaves some serious money off?
The fact that you get a lot of in-kind work that the rest of us push must have to pay for.
Exactly.
I mean, it's attractive to the Berkeley Film Foundation.
Yeah, I would say absolutely put it in there as a line item, but in kind. Right. But, yeah.
That's good.
There's a question over here. Oh, boy. All right. We'll get to you.
Advice to filmmakers. So I have a sound company. We do post-production audio. It's always wise at a very early stage of your project to check in with some of the professionals like Gary Coates, who is well loved in color correction, or my company, or Dave Nelson's, or other people who do audio, and just get an idea of what a budget might be. Our costs go up, our prices can fluctuate, but it's just always wise to talk to the vendors you're going to be working with.
Sure. Good point.
And a plug for Jim, he's awesome, and we've done some workshops in there over the years, and he's really one of the best. So he's.
Who's that? Mention him again. Who's that?
Jim.
Oh, of course. Oh, Jim. Yeah, if you don't go to Jim, something's wrong.
I just wanted to know if there was anywhere that you could get samples of successful applications and non-successful applications.
Yeah.
That might be a good question for this board.
Yeah, I mean, I've get, what?
Do that.
No. So actually, that question comes up a lot, and I've so far not wanted to do that, just because every project is so different. And so.
Hire grant writers. I mean, if you're not a grant writer, how do you know how to do one?
Yeah, I actually, I don't even know if I could tell which ones are done by grant writers, and I don't know that they're even necessarily the best ones. So, but, yeah, I mean.
National Endowment for the Humanities, where you're writing a book. And, I mean, they give out hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you are writing a book for it. Those grants, there are 1 or 2 or 3 of their funded projects are actually online. Now, that is like way overkill, but at least there's a public document that you could access. And those, huh?
They're required to have that home.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, rather than, I mean, our grants are not works of art, generally, the ones that we fund.
It's actually totally inappropriate for someone who's going to apply
To look at a national endowment.
To go to the national.
Okay, all right, I take it back. It's the only grants I can think of.
So I have one suggestion though. So we get asked all the time as well for samples, and generally I would say, okay, well, I'll ask some of our applicants, some of our grantees. People generally don't want to do that, particularly if a project's still in progress. But I do think there could be something useful that came out of a collection of really effective outreach and engagement plans. Sort of like 10 samples.
I have an idea. I think what I would do is go to filmmaking friends who have had, films that have been successful. I mean, I think occasionally I've asked a chicken export filmmaker, would you feel, I would never do it without asking, but, would you feel comfortable sharing your proposal with someone else? And I think it works both ways. Sometimes people would be okay with that, and other times not. But I think I would ask filmmaking colleagues and friends if they would be willing to share something. And maybe it's a project from the past. It doesn't have to be a present day one.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I will, welcome a call, which is like, this is what I want to do, and, I'll give you some guidance, like, okay, these are the things, like, this is what we're looking for. You tell me this, if I read this, I'm going to wonder X, Y, and Z. I'm going to wonder, how okay, that's a great story, but how are you going to tell it? And what's that going to look like? And a variety of things. So I'm happy to have a phone call on it, but yeah, so far I've not wanted to hand out the applications.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to this, what happens when you're turned down for a grant, because I just applied for this, I don't know if you probably guys know it, it's called Roydin Grant Foundation or something. Yeah, so they actually turned me down and they said, but we have someone you can talk to let you know what we think about your project. And basically they said you didn't make it to the top 40, I guess. So someone said that you were reviewing only, you would talk to someone if they made a final or the semifinal. I didn't understand. Well, in their case, it seems like they have a person who specializes in talking to you, no matter where you were in the, I don't know how many applicants they had. So that was my first question. And the second one is about fiscal sponsorship. We didn't talk about that yet, because they turned me down for a grant, but they offered me to fiscal sponsorship. And I know San Francisco Film Society does that as well. But I was wondering if you guys offer that and what are the requirements. And so that will be the second question.
Okay. So the first question was, do we only talk to finalists or?
Would you actually talk at length to someone you rejected and explain them why? Yeah.
I mean, so like I said, we're happy to chat, and it doesn't matter, whether you're whether you're a finalist or not. Excuse me. But if we get on the phone, I can say, well, this one rose to the top. To give you a sense, like where did it fall? Or I can say, it didn't really go that far. I can let you know that kind of thing. But we probably might allocate a little bit more time for projects that did rise a little further along. Excuse me. And then the fiscal sponsor question, I guess I'll answer both at the same time. So yeah, in order to receive a grant from us, you do need to have a fiscal sponsor, but you don't need to have that. But you don't need to have that set up.
Not for Berkeley Film Foundation, however. You can fund a filmmaker
Directly. But you don't need to have that set up when you apply. If you were to get, yeah.
You funded the camera person, and I was just wondering at what phase was that film at, and what did you see that made you say, we're going to make this go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, Camera Person was interesting because it was a film that she had been working on for quite a long time and sort of had a different, was going in one direction and then changed directions. So there had been, and that of course it's all based on her work. So so there was some amount of stuff that we can see or knew about some of the material. But in terms of, but she didn't have anything for this particular film, I believe, when she applied.
Since these are grants, I wonder where does the money come from, and what's the incentive to give away so much money that you won't see again?
I'll defer to you two first.
Okay, right. So our money comes from private, donations, and the incentive is, we're a nonprofit, and that's what, that's what a nonprofit is about, is giving out funds for the public good to promote that. Yeah, I mean it's probably the same answer more or less for any nonprofit is why do they give out money?
Ours comes from a combination of individuals, advice funds, family foundations, and we've actually just received a grant from the MacArthur Foundation.
That's good. Since they went out of business from funding films, it's nice.
I mean, the downside is for filmmakers,
Yeah.
they're not funding individual, and they would give a big chunk, like 100K, 200K, to filmmakers, and they're going more toward a field building, firelight, Cartemkin, chicken and egg, that type of approach. So they have kind of a new mandate, and that's actually not public information yet, so don't blog or tweet about that, please. But that's.
But I mean, to be more serious about the question about giving, I mean, it kind of goes to what Julie was saying about equity in documentary films. Documentary films kind of hold a very important particular place in terms of film and art and public policy, and it's just such a sort of I think important cross-section of all these things, and it's they're not necessarily projects that are going to be money-making, and so if you feel it's important that the films get out in the world, it seems it's a worthwhile thing to support.
Yeah, can I just respond to that real quick? So our funds primarily come from the National Endowment for the Humanities, but also some private funders. But for us, I mean, the rationale is, one, to create something, a more inclusive narrative, basically, about the state of California. We live in a state where there's a very dominant media practice, and by supporting work like this, it's actually getting more voices into the mix, and just the sort of fundamental importance, I think, of documentary, of nonprofit media, of public media.
And just to say something about the Berkeley Film Foundation, we are a public-private partnership that is funded by the City of Berkeley, Wareham Development, and the Saul Zantz Company. I mean, along with some little bits of money we get every year from other private donors. But the goal behind that was both to support, documentary filmmakers from the East Bay, as well as to help, grow and encourage a new generation of younger documentary filmmakers, which is why we have a certain amount of money set aside for students. And for, first-time filmmakers and so on. I mean, we're really looking to help nurture the next generation of filmmakers, which is a little bit different than what you guys do. Yeah. Okay, go ahead and ask your question.
This is to pick up on something you just said, Julie. There's a lot of conversation out there in the documentary landscape of like how people define themselves. Am I a artist? Am I a filmmaker? Am I a storyteller? Am I nonfiction or fiction-free, visual something or other? Right? All these different things. And anecdotally, I've found that the word journalism actually freaks a lot of people out in the funding landscape, because that's often that conjures up a mind of really sort of didactic programming, or a local news or boring public affairs and so on. That happens to be my journalism is very much part of what I do, and sort of informs the kind of stories that I want to approach, but doesn't necessarily translate to the form that it will ultimately take in terms of matching these things that people kind of want to distance themselves from in terms of the final form. We all want character-driven pieces and emotion and drama and tension and all these different things that can come out in a long-form film. And I just wanted to throw it out to the whole group, just get your reaction to that, because I've just found that journalism is a word that scares people, unfortunately, in the documentary landscape.
I mean, the one immediate thing that comes to mind is BritDoc and the Bertha Fund, which fully embraces journalism, and I think also the Knight Foundation. So there are certain places where this connect between filmmaking and journalism is very much, in discussion and embraced. And I wouldn't shy away from it at Chicken and Egg, as long as it is verite and character-driven, and if it's unearthing some story that's investigative in nature, and Semper Fi is a little bit in that vein. The one about the toxics dumping at Camp Lejeune feels like a bit of an investigative journalism piece, but also a wonderful film and storytelling. So I think embrace if that's what the film is about, but it has to be very compelling.
I agree with that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go from visual anthropology to pure experimentation, if that's a spectrum in some ways, we see stuff in that entire range. And
Yeah, I just would add that I think there's a lot of discussion now about, is it journalism, is it documentary film, and our document, you're doing both, and sort of also the requirements if it's for a journalistic piece in terms of fact checking and various things versus journal. So there's a lot of overlap. Clearly, I think it's in a lot of discussion. And I think it gets to be sort of what you were alluding to, which is, okay, well, how are you telling the story? And but certainly, I think it's understood that a lot of times there's a big journalistic investigation component to the film.
Any other questions? A couple more, and then I think we'll break soon so you can meet our panelists. Right. And we also have an announcement by one of our grant winners that I'll introduce shortly. But where's that question? Raise your hand, please.
It's your way of your good karma. What goes around comes around.
So this is just a question for Chicken and Egg. You said something about the episodics. It's a new program that you're going to have up. When do you think the timeline is for that is? And then also for the Berkeley Film Foundation, it says that it's for filmmakers within, Berkeley and right. certain areas. But how about subject matter within the city?
How about subject matter?
Yeah, like the actual documentary within Berkeley.
I actually think we're sympathetic. It's sort of you get an extra point in the review if you're telling a local story. Because often it may be only us that's interested, us meaning the kind of larger Berkeley world that might be interested in that story. So I think it's a total plus. I mean, we don't require that the story be a local story, but when it is a local story, it can also get our attention, so it's a positive.
So that's okay that I'm in San Francisco?
No, then you gotta go find yourself, in East Bay, go something.
Okay, that's okay.
Go something. Yeah.
Specifically state that you have to either live or work in our geographic area, and that goes from Richmond to Oakland.
Okay, I thought maybe work could mean that work.
Not work on the subject of, work in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can do things and just don't tell us and we'll wink at you. I'll say, if you're a filmmaker and you're adept at making a film, you can figure out how to do this on your own.
But it wasn't, let me just say this, they did disqualify a guy who did not reveal that he was using his mother's address and he lived in, somewhere in Israel.
Right, we did have that problem.
It was a little far away.
We like Googled him, and it says in his bio, you know, born and bred in Berkeley, but now lives in Israel. We're like, okay, this, and it was a fabulous film we wanted to fund, but we couldn't do it. So, you know, there are some films that we're not going to be able to fund just because of our geographic focus.
Is there one last question, then we'll have the opportunity to meet our panelists face to face over here? Oh, boy. Okay.
You're doing a great job.
Great.
Yeah.
On the subject of funding more generally than just from funds and grants, do you have any advice at finding funds other ways?
Between, beyond funds, beyond grants?
Beyond grants or your organization. So what other creative ways or options are there out there? Because I think thinking about
Well, there's certainly
or
crowdfunding.
Kickstarter, beyond that.
Crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is, you know, if you want to take people's equity stuff. I mean, some people have talked about like, you know, but brand sponsorship, which can be tricky sometimes, but that's certainly if it's a kind of film that might call for that.
Any good examples? I would love to think of a good example of a film who found a sponsor that, you know, that let the film be its own independent film, but was happy to be associated with it.
I think
Patagonia
was involved in a film.
Meru.
Oh God, about dams.
Oh, I thought it was about dams.
No, it was about dams, and they were quite involved. Damnation.
Oh, yeah, Damnation,
Yeah.
right, okay, that was.
So
a
I
great
think
title.
they are
Half of the Wild and Scenic Film Festival
Yeah.
is.
What's that?
Half of the Wild and Scenic Film Festival
Is
in
branded.
Nevada City is Patagonia and Cliff Bar.
Cliff Bar is the other one, yeah. I've heard that's a great festival too.
So, before we adjourn, we have a filmmaker here in our audience, Helen DeMichelle, who was one of our grant winners, and she has an announcement, briefly.
Thank you. My colleague, Emmy Charlotte, and I are talking about starting a creative development support group for experienced filmmakers to meet maybe weekly or bi-weekly to support the creativity and artistic expansion of your work in nonfiction film. So if you're interested in finding out more, we will take your email address and send you an email when we get it together. I thought this was a good group to tell it to.
That's great.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Very good.
So Abby, I'll have you thank our panelists officially.
Okay, I want to thank both the panelists and the audience.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Let's thank the audience.
Yeah, you were a great audience.